What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. My name is Rob Doster. It is Monday morning, and we have to talk about another frustrating UConn result. The Huskies went on the road to Omaha, took on Creighton, and lost 56-53 in a tough, hard-fought, sometimes frustrating, and not really all that aesthetically pleasing game to watch. It was definitely a defensive struggle. I think that is everybody that watched that game can understand that. But I will say this. I thought UConn played really well. It makes me feel good about where this team is moving forward. And I have no qualms about the results. I don't want to get into an argument about, oh, you're enjoying these moral victories. We'll talk about all that. We'll get into all that. I have a lot to say about this game, specifically in Creighton as well. But before I do, a couple programming notes. Remember, please go rate and review this podcast. 5 stars, say nice things about me in the comments. Make me happy as a podcaster. That's the kind of thing that really does help us in the algorithms, whether you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, Field of 68 After Dark. We're live 11 p.m. every single night throughout the rest of the season. We got a lot of big names, big talent on that show. It's kind of the flagpole of the company, flagpole of the business, and if you're a college basketball fan, you should be watching it every single night. We're simulcast on Sirius XM Channel 84, College Sports Radio as well, which is pretty cool. Lastly, the Field of 68 Daily. There is every weekday you can get 1,000 words sent directly to your email inbox. It's the best way to keep up on the sport as a whole. And we just added a premium product as well. It's going to come through on Saturdays, on the weekends. It's $9.99 for the rest of the season. You can sign up. There's a link in the description below. If you like the newsletter, if you like the product, it's a great way to help support us and help support the writers that have been pushing that product out. $10, really not all that much. It's 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks. So if you are able to afford it, it definitely is much appreciated. All right. So let's talk about this game. Let's talk about this loss, and let's talk about what happened on the floor. Before we do, I want to put this into context. I have been saying for a while that I think that Creighton is the best team in the Big East. I think that is starting to become more of a popular sentiment. I think people are starting to see how well that they are playing now that they are fully healthy. And I think people are not overlooking the fact that they have won 8 straight games anymore, which they have. They have the nation's 5th longest winning streak in all of college basketball. They are a very, very, very good team. They're not quite all that deep. They basically have 5 guys, but that is a very, very good basketball team. Let's put it into context. Let's understand exactly what I'm saying here. As of today, as of Monday morning, they are 10th on KenPom, despite the fact that they lost 6 straight games and 8 of 11 games at one point in the middle of the season. With Ryan Kalkbrenner, their star center, on the floor, they are 17-5 when he is in the lineup, when he is playing. These are the games that they have lost with Ryan Kalkbrenner healthy. They lost by 2 to Arizona in the final of the Maui Invitational. They lost by 5 at Texas, who was a top 10 team in college basketball. They lost that game at UConn by 9. They lost by 3 at Xavier. The only other loss they took was against Nebraska at home when they only put up 53 points. That was the game before Kalkbrenner ended up missing time with, I believe it was mono, if I'm not mistaken. And according to KenPom, that was the worst game that he's played all season long. He had by far his lowest offensive rating, and he was just not himself in that game. Creighton is the best defensive team in the Big East, according to KenPom, in Big East play. They're leading the league in defensive efficiency. They are the 3rd best offensive team in Big East play, according to KenPom. They are the only team in the Big East that is currently in the top 3 in both adjusted offensive efficiency and adjusted defensive efficiency. And they lead the conference in efficiency margin, which, according to the stat nerds that are usually pretty good at determining this kind of a thing, that is the best way to determine who the best team is in the sport and who the best team is in a specific conference. Creighton is really, really damn good. I'm going to take it a step further. Bart Torvik is a site that is a kind of similar to KenPom in terms of efficiency ratings that are adjusted according to strength of schedule and all these different things. According to Torvik, since Kalkbrenner returned from his illness, Creighton is a top 3 team in America. The only teams better than them during this winning streak over the course of the last 4 weeks are Alabama and Creighton. Alabama and Purdue, 2 teams that everybody agrees are probably the 2 best teams in America, and along with Houston, 2 of the teams most likely to go out and win a national title. Creighton point blank period, is a good enough team to win a national title. For my money, they are a top 5 team in America. In the snapshot in this moment right now, there are not 5 teams in America that are playing better than Creighton. Will that continue? I don't know. Will they have a sprained ankle that kind of torpedoes their season because they basically have 5 guys? I don't know. Will foul trouble end up biting them in the ass in the tournament? I don't know. I'm not saying that they're guaranteed to get to a Final Four. What I'm saying is that in a year where there is no great team, where there is no team that stands out above everybody, where there is no 2021 Baylor, where there is no 2018 Villanova, where there is no 2019 UVA, Creighton is as good as anybody in the country. Point blank, period. And UConn went into their building in front of 18,000 people on a Saturday afternoon on national television on Big Fox, and they came a toenail away from getting that thing to overtime, despite the fact that they were down by 9 points off the rip, and despite the fact they were down by 6 points with 4 minutes left, and despite the fact that Trey Alexander made a little floater in the lane off the glass to put Creighton up by 5 with 1:30 left on the clock. I thought, number one, I thought that was as good as we've seen UConn defensively in probably since December. They were moving, they were rotating, they were keeping their man in front of them. Their ability to defend ball screens was really, really impressive. One thing that Creighton really likes to do is run guys off of Kalkbrenner, getting him rolling to the rim and either throw that lob up to him or find somebody in the weak side corner. And they were able to defend that really well. They tagged really well. They communicated really well. They kept their guys in front, despite the fact that Greg McDermott is a really creative offensive mind. I thought that they were really, really, really good on the defensive end of the floor. And one of the criticisms that we've had during this stretch where UConn has not been playing great is that they haven't been a great defensive team during that stretch. They haven't been able to get a ton of stops. They haven't been able to force some turnovers. They haven't really done all that well on defensive glass. They didn't force a million turnovers, but they really kept Creighton from being able to get good looks. I thought it was a terrific defensive performance. I also thought that we saw a lot more energy on the offensive glass than we have in recent weeks from this UConn team. They got 18 offensive rebounds. They were able to keep possessions alive. Part of the reason they were able to stay close down the stretch of this game was because they were able to get second chance opportunities. And hell, if they made a couple of their kick out threes, and we might be having a very different conversation. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But the bottom line is this. Pretending I'm sipping my tea here. I'm not saying that this should be considered a moral victory. Fuck moral victories at this point in the season, right? Fuck the idea that you're proving how good you are. That's not what I'm saying here. But we need to have perspective, right? You need to be able to say, this was a free hit. This is the toughest game that UConn is going to play this season. Going on the road to play this Creighton team in that environment, in this moment in time when they are playing as well as they are. It is the toughest game that UConn had on their schedule. And those dudes fought and they scrapped and they played their asses off and they left every single thing that they had on the floor for 40 minutes. And they were 1 or 2 made shots away from finding a way to land just an absolutely incredible win, season altering win. I don't know how much more you can ask out of this group. And I know people are going to criticize Dan Hurley for some certain things. And there's going to be talk about, oh, he couldn't do this, and oh, he didn't do that, and oh, he didn't make enough adjustments. And we're going to get into all that because I went through today before I recorded this and watched every single possession in depth and broke down the film of this entire game. And I want to talk about I mentioned they were 1 or 2 shots away. Let's talk about those 1 or 2 shots. So one of the things that I tracked while watching this game was the chances that UConn had in the second half to either tie the game or take the lead in the final 12 minutes. If you remember, they were down 9 in the first half. Then Snogo hit that 3 right at the buzzer at halftime to cut it to 2. Then Hawkins had the 4-point play early in the second half to put him up. Creighton immediately scored 5 straight. So after that, after Creighton scored those 5 straight points to take the lead back, UConn had 15 possessions in about the final 14 minutes or so where they had a chance to tie the game or take the lead. They only scored on 2 of those possessions. And in a vacuum, that does not sound great. But I don't think I think that had a lot more to do with variance and a lot more to do with Creighton's defense than it did with anything to do with the scheme that Danny Hurley put together, with this team's ability to execute in high-level situations, to be able to hit crunch time shots. Like maybe there's a little bit of a mental thing there where they weren't able to hit the big shots in the big moments, but I cannot for the life of me watch that game and say UConn was not able to execute. Dan Hurley did not draw up good plays, and UConn's offense needs to be completely reevaluated and readjusted. I thought that they ran good stuff and they got good shots and they got the shots that they want. They just didn't go in. Let's break it down. So of those 15 possessions, I say that there were 3 that to me were very clear mistakes by the players. And I'm not trying to throw the players on the bus. I'm just saying that sometimes you don't make good decisions on the floor, right? When it was 40-37, Alex Caravan made a bad decision in transition. He had a 25-foot three. Sanogo was still back on defense. It was 4-on-5. There's about 20 seconds left on the shot clock. I don't think that's a great shot. I think Caravan is going to hear about that when they watch the film. The next possession, he got called for a moving screen, which that's the point of emphasis in college basketball this year. Creighton got called for 3 of them. UConn got called for 3 of them in this game. It is what it is. Those are going to get called. You got to be very mindful of setting screens when you're out on the perimeter when officials are looking at it. And the last one was the 3-on-1 fast break. I thought Diarra probably should have thrown the lob to Andre Jackson. Jackson was expecting it. If you remember, he went and he jumped, and Diarra, instead of throwing the lob, kind of went with the wraparound pass around the defender, hit Jackson in the chest. But even then, they weren't able to take the lead off of that play. But it still ended up with Naheem Aline getting a wide open 3 in the corner. And then after an offensive rebound, Jordan Hawkins ended up getting a really good look from 3 as well. And then they got another offensive rebound and Klingon missed a putback. So it's not like that resulted in UConn not being able to get a good shot on that possession. They created extra opportunities off of a missed shot, which is kind of what Dan Hurley wants. All right. So let's talk about some of the other chances that they had in the second half, right? By my count, there were 12 possessions in the half court where UConn had a chance to take the lead or tie the game. And I thought out of those 12, 8 or 9 of them arguably were good sets and good shots, and you got what you wanted out of the possession, right? Some of them were, for example, Adama getting isolated on the block, going 1 against Kalkbrenner, getting to lane, getting to his left shoulder, missing a jump hook. Sometimes he's going to make them. Sometimes he's going to miss them. You kind of live and die with that, right? Another one was you had Jordan Hawkins coming off of a curl and he got in the lane and he missed a runner. In an ideal world, you probably want him pulling up from like 12 feet and shooting a jump shot. I don't think the runner is the worst shot in the world. And I think a lot of the fact that he missed that shot had to do with how well Trey Alexander was defending him. There's a reason why Creighton is the best defensive team in the Big East. It is what it is. That's the shot that you want. You live with it. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't, right? He's not going to make every single shot. It is what it is. There was another one where Naheem Aline missed a 10-foot pull-up off a pick and roll shot that he hit in the first half, exact same possession. There was another one where they were able to get Adama Sanogo isolated at the foul line, and he was able to make a play going 1-on-1 against Ryan Kalkbrenner, made a shot coming back over his left shoulder, hit the jump hook. That's good offense. That's what you want. They had a bunch of chances with Hawkins coming off of curls where Creighton defended it really well, and possession ended up dying out. There was another one where Caravan threw a cross-court pass and had Andre Jackson wide open in the corner, and he ended up missing the 3. So I thought that overall, the offensive execution, the stuff that they were running was fine. Sometimes the shots didn't go in. And I don't think that's not necessarily a criticism on the players. It's not necessarily a criticism on the coach. I think that probably has more to do with Creighton's defense and the fact that they played that game on the road than anything else. So I'm not really all that concerned about some of the X's and O's down the stretch. The issues that honestly, I don't even want to say the issues that I had, because I thought that UConn played a very good game. They played a very smart game, and I thought that some of the tweaks that they made offensively are eventually going to be good in the long term. So let's talk about that, right? So one of the things that I did for this was I opened up questions to some people that listen. I asked on Twitter for people to send in some questions. And so I'm going to kind of answer them while also talking about this game kind of big picture. So the first one came in from Vince Hack L and Louis Rasconi, both on Twitter, and they kind of go hand in hand. So let's start with this. How will Tristan's confidence be after a disappointing game? He had 4 points, 3 assists. 2 points, 4 assists, 3 turnovers on 1 for 4 shooting in 26 minutes. And Lewis asked, what do you think UConn needs to do to keep Andre engaged and active when his shots aren't falling? So let's start with Tristan. I'm not worried about Tristan at all. I think that the fact that he had a quiet game had more to do with UConn's game plan offensively and Creighton, the way that Creighton defended them more than anything else. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what UConn tried to do. I'm sorry, I'm sitting here taking a sip while I'm doing this. I got a little bit of a cold over the weekend, trying to make sure that my voice stays intact. So one of the emphases that we saw, I don't know if that's a real word. One of the things that UConn emphasized in the half court was putting Andre Jackson in the strong side corner and then getting, whether it's Tristan Newton or Jordan Hawkins, sometimes even Alex Caravan, getting them coming off of screens at the top of the key to their right hand, forcing Kalkbrenner to play in drop coverage, and then throwing the ball back to Adama Sanogo. There was two things that this created. One, it got Adama like a lot of wide open threes. I think he finished 3 for 7, hit 3 of them in the first half, and missed 3 good looks in the second half, right? But the other part of it is that when you have Andre Jackson in the strong side corner, right, as you're driving down the right-hand side of the lane with Jackson in the corner, it engages his defender. So when you throw the ball back to Adama Sanogo, you have Ryan Kalkbrenner closing out, so Adama can attack that closeout. And one of the things we saw was his ability to drive left, kick the ball out to the shooter in the corner. We got a couple buckets out of that. One time it was he drove and he got Hassan Diarra for a wide open 3 in the corner. Another time he was able to drive left, come back to his right and hit a little jump hook. So I thought that was a really creative tweak and a smart way to try to be able to hide the fact that Andre Jackson's defender wasn't guarding him. You created a 2-man game on the weak side of the floor, and all while kind of engaged Andre's defender. So I thought that was really smart game plan, and it's part of the reason why Tristan didn't really get much going. Look, drop coverage means the big guy is playing off of the screener, the defensive big guy is playing off of the screener, and you have the guy trailing over the top. So not only is Tristan driving into the help defender, you have Ryan Kalkbrenner there, and you have Ryan Nembhard right there on him. It's basically going 1-on-3, and it was really smart of him the way that he was able to get the ball back to Sanogo. That was the game plan. So I think, just my opinion, maybe I'm wrong. This is what I get from watching the tape. I haven't talked to the staff about this, but I think that's kind of what they were looking for. So I'm not super concerned about the fact that Tristan didn't have a huge game in this matchup. And I think it's also fair to say Creighton's really good defensively. It is what it is. All right. The other thing that they did to kind of create opportunities for Adama Sanogo and to try to hide Andre Jackson's defender was they would run an action to get Adama isolated at the foul line. And then what they would do is on each side of the floor, they would run a pin down action. And that meant that you had defenders engaged, you had guys coming off of screens, you had screeners that had to be worried about it, and it let Sanogo kind of go 1-on-1 against Kalkbrenner. Scored twice in the first half on it, scored once in the second half on it. And he was able to get a couple assists out of it. If you remember the first half, there was one time where he drove. Shireman actually came on the double, and he was able to dump the ball down to Andre Jackson, who was able to get a dunk out of it. And I thought that was a really smart way to kind of free up Andre Jackson's defender as well. So there was to me, those were the two things that I noticed that I haven't necessarily noticed a ton in recent games that UConn has played. So I thought that those were the two tweaks that they put in, and I thought it worked with varying degrees of success. But, I thought that they were smart game plan tweaks, and I thought it was smart for them to use it in this game. As far as what UConn needs to do to keep Andre engaged and active when the shots aren't falling, one of the things was what they were doing was using him as the weak side screener. Another thing was to have him in the strong side corner and use him as like a rim runner in the dunker spot. What you would do if you had someone like a Clint Capella on the floor, right? Just have him standing by the rim and use him as the vertical spacer. They haven't really mastered the art of that at this point, but it's something where you're seeing it a little bit more on a couple more possessions here, a couple more possessions there. I would like to see him get used more on lobs on the offensive end of the floor. So hopefully that'll be something that happens as teams start guarding him. Just have him run to the rim, throw it up, let him go dunk on somebody. But I also think so. Andre didn't play great in the first half. I think he missed 5 shots in the first 6 minutes. Then he ended up getting subbed out, came back in, didn't have a great first half. I thought he was much, much better in the second half. And one thing that I noticed, the first play that they ran out of halftime was it's a set that they run a whole bunch where they have Andre fake like he's going to set a backswing for Caravan, flash back to the ball, and then have Jordan Hawkins run off of a staggered screen to the top, try to get him an open 3. But the first thing that they did, the first time they ran it, they threw the ball into Jackson in the post. He turned around and he hit a little 3-foot floater off the glass, made a shot, saw the ball go through the basket, and Confidence is up, feeling himself a little bit, feeling good about himself coming out of the break. And I thought that he was much better defensively in the second half. I think you saw him hit a little, he had like an 18-foot floater the next time that he shot the ball. About 2 minutes later, he had another one where he drove to the rim. He missed the shot, but he was able to fight and keep the ball active and keep the ball alive. I'm sorry. And they got a second chance point out of it. I think one of the things that is important to note is, as much as Andre struggles offensively, part of the reason why UConn was able to get so many second chance opportunities and so many second chance points in the second half was how active he was and how athletic he was and his work on the offensive glass. So what does Hurley need to do to keep Andre Jackson active and engaged? Like, just keep doing what he's been doing, right? I thought that it was, especially in the second half, I thought Andre was very, very good on that end of the floor. He got beat once or twice by Baylor Shireman. There were two where I thought that a moving screen should have been called on Kalkbrenner off the ball. One was very obvious. It was after Hawkins gave them the lead on the very next possession. They ran Shireman off of a baseline screen, and Kalkbrenner took a step as Andre was coming by him, knocked him about 3 feet off the ball. And Shireman got a wide open three, banged it. That should have been a moving screen in my mind. So I'm not blaming Andre for that one. It wasn't his best defensive game, but I thought he was good enough, especially in the second half. So I'm not really all that. I think that they're kind of finding some ways to make it work with Andre. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be beautiful. It's always going to be somewhat frustrating to watch, but that just kind of is the hand that we've been dealt as UConn fans at this point, right? It is what it is. Got to find a way to get him going, because I think UConn is better when he's on the floor. The other thing that I would note is that we've seen an uptick in Naheem Aline's minutes in the second half of the season. And I would focus on getting him more time on the floor. I like the lineups when it's Tristan Newton, Jordan Hawkins, Naheem Aline, and Alex Karaban at the 4, when Andre's not playing well, more than anything else that they can put out there if you're not going to have Andre Jackson on the floor. So I would just that's what I would say is keep him involved, try to get an easy look in the start of the half, get his confidence going a little bit. And then when he's not playing well, getting Naheem Aline on the floor, because I think that he's better off the dribble than I realized. He's hit some pull-ups the last couple of games. They put him in some ball screen actions, and it's worked. He'd be a floor spacer, and I think that he's actually a good defender. He's not great. He's a little bit smaller. He's not going to be able to kind of mess things up as much defensively, but he's not a liability on that end of the floor like a Joey Calcaterra is. So I would play more minutes for Naheem Aline. Another question I got asked, this was actually DM, so I'm not going to put the name out there for who it was, but why didn't Donovan Clingan play more in this matchup? And for me, well, one, I don't think Clingan has necessarily been great since Big East play started. He's got a little bit of a high center of gravity. When you're not guarding Andre Jackson, it kind of eliminates what Clingan does really well, and that's as the rim runner. He's not someone you're going to throw the ball to in the post and have him go make a play. He's not someone that's going to be able to space the floor a little bit and make a play. You can't do the ISOs at the foul line the way that you've done with Adama Sanogo. So he's really like a guy that's going to go get offensive rebounds, that's going to block some shots. He's not great switching. He's not great on the perimeter. I don't think he's as good in ball screens as Adama is. So he is a little bit limited. Now, what I will say is that there was a play in the first half. They ran the Spain pick and roll, which is basically like you run a pick and roll and have a second defender set a back screen on the guy that's supposed to be guarding the big guy. And they got a lob out of it because they had Naheem Aline on the weak side. So the tagger was engaged. Andre Jackson wasn't on the floor there. But when Andre's on the floor and that extra defender's in the paint, there's no room to be able to get that rim run. So I think that Clingan is just a little bit of victim of the way that teams are playing us, and he's not quite good enough yet to be able to take advantage of some of that. So I also think that part of this was the game plan, right? So much of what UConn did offensively was focused around Adama Sanogo and pick and pop actions, and you can't play Clingan and pick and pop actions right now. And when he came in, he did a lot of good stuff, kept balls alive, got second chance opportunities. Some of it was against Creighton's backup center, so he did really well in his role. I just don't know how much you could have played him because it really, really limited what UConn wanted to do in the half court. So I think that this was just a matchup thing, which leads me to the next question. What do you think about Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan playing together more? That's from Husky Century. I don't think this is something that you want to use a ton of. I don't think that this is something where you want to use it in every matchup, specifically because of foul trouble, right? So much of what UConn wants to do offensively revolves around the presence of Adama Sanogo on the court, whether it's throwing the ball to him in the post and letting him play off of that, whether it's running those sets where you get him isolated at the high post and have him go one-on-one against the center, whether it's the pick and pop actions, whatever you do, like Adama's involved in all of that. And having him at the 4 means that he's going to end up having to guard somebody on the perimeter 90% of the time, right? Do you really want to risk 1, him getting tired, and 2, him getting in foul trouble for a situation like that? I don't think that that's necessarily the best thing that you want to do. I do, however, think that it is a weapon that you want in your arsenal. It's something that you want to be able to use when the matchup dictates it. Like, for example, I think that it'll probably work fairly well against a team like a Providence, where they're going to have either Clifton Moore or Ed Croswell on the floor. And at the 4, a guy like Bryce Hopkins, like, he kind of plays a little bit of bully ball, right? He can get to the offensive glass. You can kind of use him in the mid post. Like, he's not, I'm going to say a name. Please don't take this as me comparing him to him, but he's got a little Carmelo in his game where he's really good at like those 17-foot mid post isolations. And that's, excuse me. That's where Providence can kind of take advantage of that matchup with Alex Caravan. I also think it's important to note that, like, Caravan's gotten a lot better in defensively at the 4 spot. Kaluma was 0 for 6 yesterday. Omax Prosper, he didn't really do much in the game against Marquette. Fremantle, when they played the home loss to Xavier, only had 9 points. He held his own against DePaul in some less than ideal matchups, right? He did well against Georgetown, some of those matches. Like, he's risen to the challenge. It was something where that was the scouting report about a month and a half ago, and I think Caravan's actually gotten a lot better defensively. Like, he was kind of called out. He's kind of exposed, and he's risen to the challenge. I thought that he's gotten really good on that end of the floor. And to me, I don't know if that's necessarily like the biggest weakness that UConn has anymore. So I'm fine with Caravan playing the 4 defensively. Like, I think he's gotten better. And we'll see. We got Providence game coming up. I think it's something that Seton Hall probably has some guys that might be able to take advantage of that matchup a little bit. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But, there's another question. Will Samson Johnson eventually have a role this season? I don't think so. I doubt it. It's mid-February. Caravan's gotten better. The advantage of having Samson Johnson out there was because of what he could do defensively with the length and athleticism, but he's not really a shooter. So you end up with another situation where you don't have a floor spacer on the floor. Like, how can you have him and Andre Jackson playing together when you don't really have to respect either of their jump shots? And if you're going to do that, do you really want to have, like, can you put him at the 4 when Sanogo's at the 5? Do you want to have him out there with Donovan Clingan? Like, I don't know if Johnson is going to end up having a role. Like, hopefully he sticks around because that dude is just such a freak of nature athlete. But he's got to figure some things out. 1 and 2, he's really got to stay healthy. Not missing the first 6 weeks of the season when UConn kind of figured this thing out was probably not ideal for him long term. Last question I got, then we can wrap this thing up, is what is the best matchup for UConn to be able to win the Big East tournament? And it looks fairly fair. There's a very good chance that UConn's going to end up getting the 5 seed here. Maybe they'll get the 4 seed. Most likely they're going to end up getting the 5 seed, especially if they beat Seton Hall next Saturday. With the schedule that they have left, worst case scenario, I think that they probably should go 3-2, if not 4-1 over these next games, depending on what you think about the game at St. John's, which I'm not super concerned about, and at Villanova, which might be tough, especially if Justin Moore gets it going down the stretch. What that means is, in all likelihood, UConn is going to have to beat 3 of Marquette, Creighton, Xavier, and Providence to be able to cut down the nets in Madison Square Garden. And there's no real easy pick there. Those are all second weekend NCAA tournament teams. Those are all teams that are good enough to win the Big East tournament. Those are all teams that are very, very, very well coached. Like, it's the Big East tournament. The once you get to the quarterfinals and beyond, like, it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. And drawing that first round matchup in the 4-5 game is just it's a nightmare, especially if you end up getting Providence in that first game. Like it's almost to the point where I think I don't know, you probably don't want to get the 6 seed because you got to play a game already. But if it means that you get Xavier or Marquette in the quarterfinals instead of Providence or Creighton in the quarterfinals, I think that's ideal because I like the matchups. I like UConn's matchups with Marquette and Xavier a little bit more than with Providence and with Creighton. And the reason that I say that is I think with this UConn team right now, they are going to be better against teams that are really good offensively and that can struggle on the defensive end. I have more faith in UConn finding a way to slow down a good offense than I do in them finding a way to be able to be really good offensively against a team that is a good defensive team. And I do think that they, with the lack of size from the interior that Marquette has, I think where you can see them, one, take advantage of that with Sonogo, two, be able to get to the offensive glass, and three, they have the athleticism and the versatility defensively to be able to chase some of those guys around on the perimeter. So I'm not super concerned. Maybe that's the wrong way to phrase it, but I think that is a matchup that UConn would have a better chance of winning. Same thing with Xavier, especially if Zach Fremantle, he's got this foot injury, and I think he's supposed to come back like a week before the Big East tournament, maybe right around the start of the Big East tournament. So if you're kind of getting them when that dude is not quite, 100% back, I think that's probably a little bit ideal for my money. Fremantle's like their second or third best player. So if you can get a team without their second or third best player, he's the matchup that kind of makes him difficult because then you have two guys that can shoot, whatever. Like I said, I think Creighton's the best team in the Big East. If you can avoid them until the finals of the Big East tournament, that's probably your best case scenario. And Providence is just like, with Bryce Hopkins at the 4, I think that makes it, that is where, as I know what I just said about Caravan, but that is where I think that you can kind of expose UConn a little bit defensively. And for my money, what makes Providence so tough is they have 3 different guys when things break down, they can go win a possession for you. They can go make a play. They can go make a shot. In Jared Bynum, Devin Carter, and Bryce Hopkins. Combine all that with the fact that I think Ed Cooley is just a terrific matchups-based coach. I don't want to see them until the final either. So I think the best case scenario for UConn would be Marquette being the 1 seed, Providence and Creighton being the 2 and the 3 seed, and then Xavier being the 4 seed, and UConn ending up as the 5 seed. But that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, right? Like, go out and beat Seton Hall before we even worry about what the match was going to end up being in the Big East tournament. So that's all the questions that I had, or all the questions I'm going to answer for today. But I do just want to emphasize one point, and that is I think UConn is kind of finding their stride again, right? More than finding their stride. I think that they've found their stride. They're never going to play up to the level that they were at the start of the season. I just don't think that with the things that defenses have kind of figured out and the amount of tape out there on UConn right now, that they're necessarily going to be able to look like the best team in college basketball like they looked in the month of December. It's just not going to happen. They're a little bit exploitable. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. I don't need to rehash it. But what I will say is this: with Tristan Newton getting things going again, with Jordan Hawkins kind of finding his footing, with some of the tweaks that we're starting to see UConn put in to take advantage of the fact that they have Andre Jackson to get him going offensively, with a week off before Seton Hall starts, and then a very easy, I don't want to say easy, but a favorable run in, like, you have a chance to get this thing going. You have a chance to really get right. You have a chance to get this confidence in a place where you want it to be. And I feel good about UConn being able to make a run. I think that they are capable of winning the Big East tournament. I think that they could beat any of the top 4 teams in this league. I don't know if I really feel great sitting here saying, yeah, I feel good about them finding a way to win 3 straight against the top 4 in the Big East. Like, that's going to be fucking brutal. Let's be honest. That's going to be a really difficult thing to do. But I do think that they are good enough in a vacuum to win any one of those 3 games against any of those 4 teams. And then when it comes to the tournament, right, you get out of the conference. Maybe that's the answer that UConn needs. Maybe when teams aren't quite as familiar with them, it's a little bit easier to beat them. Just because the scouting report is available on paper, just because coaches know what to do, doesn't mean that those other teams are going to know how to execute it quite as well. So who knows? We'll see. But I do think that this is a top 15-ish kind of a team in college basketball. I think that they, especially as they're starting to hit the glass again, I think that they're kind of they're figuring this thing out and they're trending in the right direction, and they're going to be able to kind of move this thing forward. So I feel good. I'm not stressing. I hope you aren't stressing. I hope that you appreciated the effort that that team played with on Saturday. And always remember this: as bad as you feel, as frustrated as you are about a loss, as disappointed as you are about a loss, everybody in that locker room feels 15 times worse. All I think you should do, rage tweet, do whatever you want. Don't tag the players, don't tag the coaches, don't be that guy. You can rage tweet, you can get your frustrations out, you can do whatever you need to do. Like that's what Twitter was invented for. Make sure you support these guys, make sure you push them because they are trying. The one thing that I don't think you can ask any more out of a group of guys than to bust their ass and give 100% and leave everything on the court. And if you left that Creighton game, if you turned that TV off thinking they did anything else, then I don't know what you were watching. Me and you were watching a different game. So listen, Top Dogs, please rate, review, subscribe to the Field of 68 newsletter, subscribe to the Daily Premium. Make sure you are subscribed to us on YouTube. March is here, baby. Super Bowl's gone. Let's get it going.